The phrase Pope Francis Mansion conjures up images of enormous halls, gilded ceilings, and an infinite supply of luxury for those who hear in their minds. However, what is the reality? Not even close to that at all. The Pope Francis took a decision that was unexpected in contrast to the popes who came before him, who resided in the Grand Apostolic Palace. He didn't want to live a life of luxury. He decided to live in a humble property known as Casa Santa Marta, which is a straightforward guest house located within the walls of the Vatican, a choice that many people were taken aback by at the time. What could possibly motivate the most influential religious leader in the world to make a decision that goes against millennia of tradition? Was it simply a matter of humility? Is there something else? There was a famous quote attributed to Pope Francis that stated, "I would love a church that is poor and for the poor." The living quarters he chose to reside in became a representation of that belief. All you get is a plain room exactly like any other guest, with no opulent apartments or extraordinary service. However, this is the point at which the narrative adopts an odd turn. In the immediate aftermath of his passing, Vatican officials promptly blocked off his apartment. Once an area that was open and unpretentious, it was now completely closed off. There were no explanations given, and high-ranking members of the clergy were not allowed to enter. How come within those fortifications, what was it that required such a high level of protection? Was it merely a matter of common practice? Is it possible that they were concealing something that had the potential to rock the fundamental foundation of the Church? The location of Pope Francis's bed was not the only issue at hand. It was about the things that he had overlooked. Furthermore, as rumors began to circulate, people started to worry whether or not his uncomplicated way of life was a front for something far more significant. Let's delve even further into the enigma, because it's possible that Pope Francis's life of simplicity was not as uncomplicated as it appeared to be. A life that is uncomplicated. That is what we believed. The nickname the People's Pope was given to Pope Francis for a specific set of reasons. Even before he took his first steps onto the international stage, he made it quite plain he did not resemble the popes who came before him. Simply a man of faith strolling among the people. There were no extravagant ceremonies and there were no gilded thrones. On the other hand, was there something else hiding beneath this picture of modesty? Did his uncomplicated way of life also serve as a covert tactic? His decision to live a humble life was considered to be a reflection of his goal for a number of years, in order to alter the Church to bring it closer to those who are marginalized and those who are disadvantaged. His home at Casa Santa Marta was more than just a place to lay his head down at night. It was a form of assertion. However, now that he has passed away and his quarters have been abruptly sealed off, many people are beginning to wonder what was actually going on behind those closed doors. There is a school of thought within the Vatican that suggests Pope Francis made use of his humble and quiet surroundings as a safe haven, a location where plans were formulated, letters were written, and secrets were concealed from the prying eyes of those who were opposed to his reforms. Despite the fact that he led a simple life, his thoughts were anything but insignificant. As one source said, "Is it possible that the walls of Casa Santa Marta contain more than just the possessions of a pope? Do you think they could hold the blueprint for a church that has been transformed?" It was about to become clear to the entire world that this circumstance was not merely a simple chamber. That room was hiding something, and it was about that. And when the Vatican officials took the decision to seal it, they were not only safeguarding memories, the object that they were protecting was significantly more powerful. So was this merely a matter of custom? Or was the Vatican in a hurry to acquire knowledge that could completely alter the course of history? Let us investigate the actual events that take place when the house of a pope is closed down, as well as the reasons why this time it felt different. Certain rites are required to be carried out in accordance with the Vatican protocol or anything else when a pope passes away. The residence of one of them is being impenetrable. It is a custom that is created with the intention of safeguarding personal belongings, correspondence, and formal papers until later examination. But something didn't feel quite right this time. In most cases, this procedure is unobtrusive and almost effortless. However, when Vatican guards sealed off Pope Francis's apartments, rumors started to circulate across Rome regarding the situation. People started asking, why is there such a sense of urgency? What is the reason behind the secrecy reports started to come out? including allegations that the contents contained personal writings, secret documents, and even a list of names concealed within them. In the opinion of some, they were not any old papers. It was a set of plans, drastic changes that Pope Francis was never given the opportunity to disclose to the general people. According to a statement made by a Vatican official, the contents of the book are not simply historical fact. In other words, it is the Church's future. Then the rumors that genuinely captured people's attention began to circulate. Documents that indicate to a succession plan, suggestions for restructuring the Church, and adventurous steps that some members of the Vatican may not have wanted to see the light of day are all included in this collection. Why was it that even senior cardinals were not allowed to enter? What was so time-sensitive that the Vatican acted more quickly than it normally would have? It wasn't only a matter of following protocol when Pope Francis's house was sealed. In order to maintain control over information that may potentially provoke discussions on a worldwide scale, or even schism within the Church, it felt like a race against time. Still, in the midst of all these rumors, there was one name that kept coming up again and again. This name is connected to these top-secret plans. This is Luis Antonio Tali. To be more specific, what things did Pope Francis leave behind? And for what reason is Tagli's name anywhere in the middle of everything that's going on? It is imperative that we delve into the core of the enigma, as it is possible that concealed within those walls is a plan that has the potential to completely transform the Church. Where can I get a plan for the future? When officials from the Vatican locked the humble house of Pope Francis, very few people anticipated what would happen that followed. There are rumors that documents have been buried. On the other hand, these were not your typical papers or informal notes. According to those who are familiar with the situation, what they discovered was nothing less than a plan, a strategy that has the potential to completely transform the Catholic Church. It was whispered that Pope Francis himself had written personal letters, and that these letters had been meticulously crafted correspondence that detailed concepts that were significantly more extreme than anything he had articulated in public. He provided a list of successors that he believed might continue his mission forward, as well as strategies for reform, comprehensive ideas of a church that was more inclusive, and maybe the most disturbing of all such things. It is improper for popes to reveal the names of their successors in accordance with the customs. However, Francis was never a man who was constrained by convention. He was aware of the opposition he encountered. He was well aware that change would not be able to endure unless someone was courageous enough to carry it forward. Francis didn't only wish for change according to a person from the Vatican who spoke in a discreet manner. He was the one who planned it. Within those blueprints, there was a single name that kept popping up again and over again. This is Luis Antonio Tali. According to the assertions, these records did not merely make a casual reference to Tagli. Through their actions, they positioned him at the heart of a future church that would be built on compassion, equality, and relevance to the modern world. It would appear that Pope Francis did not leave his legacy up to chance if these claims are accurate. From the hereafter, he was directing it in our direction. However, this discovery brings up even more issues than before. How come these materials were kept a secret? Did they intend to be disclosed at the appropriate time? Another possibility is that they were concealed in order to avoid an immediate backlash from conservative forces within the Vatican. In addition, if Tagli was in fact a participant in this covert vision, what does this imply for the subsequent chapter of the Church's history? Something was very clear. These weren't merely papers at all. They were a revolution that was taking place in silence, waiting for the appropriate time to start. However, who precisely is the one who is at the center of this covert scheme? How did Pope Francis come to place such a high level of faith in him? Let's refocus our attention on the solitary figure who is lurking in the shadows. This is Luis Antonio Tali. Unseen in the shadows is the protege. For many years, Luis Antonio Tagli was able to move freely within the Vatican without attracting an excessive amount of attention. A humble and soft-spoken individual who has a strong connection to the people, never one to want the limelight, he never sought it out. However, he was noted by someone, a person who was significant. This is Pope Francis. It was not by chance that Tagle made his way from the bustling streets of Manila to the Vatican, where he is now considered to be one of the most important personalities. It came about as a consequence of having ideals in common, having private conversations and forming a connection based on a shared vision for a church that serves rather than rules. His nickname, Asian Francis, was a nickname that conveyed a great deal of information. Tagle, much like Pope Francis, was of the opinion that humility comes before hierarchy and compassion comes before control. The two are said to have held a large number of secret sessions behind closed doors, during which they discussed not just the present, but also everything that lies ahead. It was stated by a person with knowledge of the situation that Francis saw in Tagle not only a cardinal, but also a continuation of his dream. After some time had passed, Tagle was given the responsibility of overseeing delicate missions, worldwide outreach and reforms that were in perfect accordance with Francis' principles. To those who were paying close attention, it became quite evident that Tagle was not merely another church leader, he was getting himself ready. What exactly are you ready for? The situation is now more transparent as a result of the uncovering of those previously concealed documents. But Tagle was more than just a reliable advisor. It is possible that he was the individual who was selected to lead a more subdued revolution. On the other hand, Tagle never mentioned his aspirations. No suggestion of larger aspirations was ever made by him. Because of this, Pope Francis, a leader who did not desire power, but was called to serve, found him to be even more fascinating than he already was. Is it possible that this covert mentoring arrangement was part of a larger, more meticulously crafted plan? There is a new question that arises as the world starts to make connections between concepts. In light of the fact that Pope Francis was aware that his time on earth was finite, did he devise a succession plan that would outlive him? Now let's investigate how the relationship between the Pope and his protege can shed light on a choice that has been in the works for many years. The succession plan that wasn't seen. The Pope is not authorized to make decisions regarding who succeeds them. The Church itself has been around for a very long time. Pope Francis, on the other hand, was the only person who could discreetly affect the future without breaking tradition while doing so. Francis has been making subtle gestures that now appear to be much more purposeful, and he has been hinting about retirement for years. He has also been upfront about his issues with his health. It wasn't only that he was getting ready to step down, he was getting the Church ready for what was going to happen after this, not through official statements, but rather by trust mentorship and setting key players like Luis Antonio Tagle exactly where they needed to be. Many people feel that he was cultivating an unseen succession plan behind the scenes. A.B. According to the words of a Vatican expert, Francis did not leave the future up to probability. It was Tagle who was the most powerful of the seeds that he planted. Today, the unexpected sealing of Pope Francis' house takes on a new significance than it had before. Shouldn't the primary concern be the protection of personal belongings? Alternatively, was it about safeguarding key plans that could disclose the extent to which Francis had meticulously designed the potential course of action? The existence of these concealed documents could provide an explanation for everything if they revealed that Tagle was the driving force behind this scheme. The private meetings, the quick ascension of Tagle within the ranks of the Vatican, and the pressing need to safeguard Francis' quarters after his demise all contributed to the stress. However, such a plan would not be without of potential dangers. Within the Church, there are powerful factions that would do anything to maintain their dominance. A successor such as Tagle, who is well known for his progressive beliefs, would pose a danger to the established order. What might possibly be the reason for the Vatican's rapid response for the purpose of determining how and when these revelations would be brought to light? The world is currently watching and waiting. Did Pope Francis's tactic of being silent suffice to ensure that his vision would be preserved? On the other hand, will he be buried with his ambitions by resistance from within? One thing is unmistakable. If Tagle is in fact the Pope's predetermined successor, then his mission is significantly more important than anyone could have ever anticipated. On the other hand, what exactly is that duty? Which of these three options, reform, revolution, or a risky risk, is it? First, let's find out what it is that Tagle is actually being asked to complete. Change, revolution, or taking a chance? If the rumors that are circulating from within the walls of the Vatican are accurate, and if Luis Antonio Tagli is in fact at the core of Pope Francis's covert strategy, then he is not simply entering a new phase of his leadership career. It seems as if he is walking a tightrope that is stretched between the past and the prospective future. Moreover, there is no safety net further down. For as long as anyone can remember, Tagli has been known for his calm strength and profound compassion. Since his early days in the Philippines, he had a reputation for being the cardinal who listened attentively even when other people were preaching. In addition to walking among the impoverished and standing with refugees, he also spoke up for people that the world and the church at times had forgotten. In many respects, Tagli is the embodiment of the human face of the cause that Pope Francis has fought for many years. An institution that extends its doors to a greater number of people, that prioritizes mercy above judgment, and that has the courage to care more than it demands. But the stakes are larger than they have ever been before. As a result of the discovery of concealed documents in the sealed house of Pope Francis materials that are supposed to indicate a bold agenda for reform, Tagli is confronted with a problem that is significantly more difficult than providing pastoral care or charitable work. Because of this, kindness is no longer the only factor. Confronting centuries of tradition, unstated rules, and influential persons who feel the Church should continue precisely as it is the focus of this endeavor. One Vatican observer made the pointed observation that Tagli is not being asked to take the lead. It is being demanded of him to complete what Francis began, which is a risky course of action, due to the fact that every step toward transformation comes with a price tag. In the event that Tagli makes an effort to promote greater inclusiveness, whether it be for underrepresented communities, women, or interfaith discourse, he runs the risk of generating a backlash from individuals who view such actions as betrayal rather than progress. For every individual who expresses admiration for his vision, there will be many others who are prepared to accuse him of undermining the foundations of the Church. Furthermore, let us not overlook the fact that the Vatican is a location where power is not always assertive. In addition to being calm and calculated, it is profoundly ingrained. Tagli would be entering a battleground where smiles conceal opposition, and tradition is used as a weapon. Tagli would be entering his own battlefield. What exactly is the purpose of this mission? Could it be a straightforward reform, a gradual development of the Church's function in contemporary society? Or is it something that is significantly more audacious? A revolution that is not audible, which is concealed by the language of compassion, but which is destined to bring down structures that have been in place for more than 2 millennia. In either case, it is a risk that very few people would be willing to take. Nevertheless, for Tagli, who is supported by the confidence of Pope Francis and possibly constrained by his last desire, it is possible that leaving is no longer an option. Now, this is no more a matter of individual preference. This is a matter of duty, one that has the potential to alter the course of the Catholic Church's future. On the other hand, there are some people who are not willing to support Tagli's vision and are not standing behind him. As a matter of fact, powers within the Vatican are already making preparations for their defense, while the rest of the world watches with optimism, for the simple reason that wherever there is talk of revolution, there is usually resistance. In order to get a better understanding of the silent opposition that is forming within the heart of Rome, let's draw back the curtain and investigate the force that is determined to stop Tagli before he ever begins. For every voice that is shouting for progress, there is always another voice that is softer, more calculating, and saying not so quickly. This is the Vatican's underground resistance. It is not merely opinions that are being whispered within the walls of the Vatican, which are centuries old. They are attempts to gain power. In many cases, the reverberation of those murmurs is more audible than the acclaim of the spectators. During his whole pontificate, Pope Francis was not only responsible for leading prayers, battles were being fought by him. These, however, were not conflicts that were waged in the open. It was not the case. Unspoken conflicts that are fought in private gatherings behind closed doors and in corridors that date back hundreds of years, where tradition is given more weight than vision. His advocacy for a church that is more compassionate and welcoming to all people was celebrated by millions of people all around the world. On the other hand, conservative forces inside the Vatican regarded every step of change as a challenge, not only to dogma, but also to the very institutions of power that they had maintained for generations. Now that Pope Francis has passed away, those same factions perceive a chance not to mourn, but to regain what they believe was being taken away from them because of his passing and taking a position that is right in their way. This is Luis Antonio Tagle. Many people look to Tagle as a symbol of hope. Those who are adamant about maintaining the status quo, on the other hand, see him as representative of something much more perilous: the living incarnation of Francis's unfinished revolution. Reportedly, a Vatican source predicted that a Tagle era would undermine decades of control, and this prediction was accurate. There is no fear of change in that, it's the dread of succumbing to power. Is it possible that this could explain why the Vatican acted so rapidly to shut the house of Pope Francis? The question is whether it was actually about protecting a legacy or whether it was a calculated effort to constrain the most audacious aspects of his agenda. It is possible that if these plans were to become public, they would thrust the church into a future that many people are dreading. There is a fight that is taking place in the background, one that the majority of Catholics all around the world will never see silence delays. And maneuvering behind the scenes are the tactics that are used to combat this issue rather than public announcements. A conflict between those who feel that in order for the church to continue, it must undergo change, and those who believe that survival is contingent on maintaining everything in the same manner as it has always been. There is no question that Tagle is now at the center of this issue, regardless of whether he asked for it or not. For those who are waiting for an opportunity to undermine him, every decision he makes and every word he speaks or does not express will be analyzed by those individuals. Silent resistance is frequently the most harmful type of resistance, since it is difficult to anticipate its arrival until it is already too late. It is now the matter of whether or not Tagle is capable of overcoming this invisible wall of opposition. Alternatively, will these unseen powers be successful in stowing away Pope Francis' most audacious intentions, so guaranteeing that they are never exposed to the light of day? However, this is not solely about the politics of the Vatican. It is certain that the repercussions of this internal conflict will be felt well beyond the gates of Rome. It is possible that the outcome of this undetected conflict will determine the fate of more than 1 billion Catholics, as well as the role that the Church plays in addressing global challenges such as poverty, human rights, and climate change. Therefore, what will occur if Tagle continues to move forward in spite of the opposition? Is it possible that the mysteries that are kept hidden within the home of Pope Francis could trigger a transformation that spreads to every part of the world? Let's investigate the ways in which these concealed truths have the potential to usher in a new era for the Catholic Church, as well as the reasons why the entire world need to pay special attention to this matter. Should the Catholic Church usher in a new era, there will be repercussions that are felt beyond the gates of the Vatican if Luis Antonio Tagle is successful in assuming the role that many people feel Pope Francis has been quietly preparing him for. Their effects will be felt all around the planet. There is the potential for a Tagle-led church to represent a historic transition from an institution centered in Europe to a spiritual community that is really worldwide. One that is directly addressed to the expanding populations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia has been proposed. It is one that addresses themes that are relevant to the actual world, such as poverty, migration, climate change, and social justice. Not only the doctrine of spirituality, it has been pointed out by a commenter that this is not solely about religion. This pertains to reframing the role that the Church plays in contemporary society. We can witness a church that under Tagle's leadership is open to discourse with people of other faiths, advocates for human rights, and finally confronts questions that have been evaded for a long time regarding inclusion and equality. A revolution of this magnitude, however, would not merely inspire hope. As a result, it would spark controversy. It's possible that nations' political leaders and traditionalists will push back against a church that dares to get involved in global concerns beyond the traditional realm of the pulpit. Is it possible that Pope Francis had this as his final objective from the beginning? Will you like to hand over the helm to someone who will dismantle long-standing barriers and ensure that the Church remains relevant in today's varied and modern world? If this is the case, then the contents of that mansion that was hermetically sealed were not merely a collection of papers. As a plan for world change, it was a roadmap. Now that the truth is gradually becoming more apparent, there is one last question that needs to be answered. What does the future have in store for Tagle, and is he prepared to face it yet? It is time to pull everything together. What can we expect from the future? The door to the mansion locks. The mysteries have been buried for the time being. However, the impact of what was discovered within the residence of Pope Francis is already impacting the church to the point that it is shaking its foundations. As the world waits in quiet, everyone is curious to know whether or if Luis Antonio Tagle would come forward and play the part that was alluded to in those previously concealed documents. Will the weight of tradition and the reluctance that he feels within him prevent him from taking that leap? Or will he honor the vision that Pope Francis has for the future? There has been no public statement made by Tagle regarding these findings. Yet there are times when silence is more powerful than words. At this moment, the Catholic Church is at a strategic crossroads. There is a way that you can return to the familiarity of the past. The alternative path leads to transformation, a future in which faith is brought into harmony with the facts of the modern world. According to the thoughts of a Vatican expert, this is not simply about a leader. This pertains to the very essence of the Church. So what transpires after this? Is Tagle going to emerge as the leader that Pope Francis has been secretly preparing him to be? On the other hand, will those plans be kept secret for all time by unseen forces? What is certain is one thing. Everything is different now because of what they discovered in Pope Francis' residence. What about this tale? The battle is not yet over. Be sure to keep up with the news, for history is being written right now.